Incredible calm exposed, how one waitress touching composure surprised 20 armed robbers. The evening light seeped through the diner's windows, casting a warm golden glow over the familiar landscape of cracked vinyl booths and cheerful linoleum tiles. But as Sarah wiped down the counter, the clinking of forks and the rustling of receipts were abruptly drowned out by the sound of shattering glass and a cacophony of voices. Footsteps thundered against the linoleum floor, and her heart dropped into her stomach. The diner transformed from a comforting refuge to a battleground, and for a moment, Sarah froze, her gaze caught by the gleam of weapons thrust in the air. A nerve-wracking mixture of disbelief and dread coursed through her veins. 15 seconds. That was all it took for chaos to unfurl like a consuming fire. Customers screamed, hitting the floor, some scrambling beneath tables while others stood paralyzed with shock. The very essence of her diner, where laughter and camaraderie mingled over coffee and pie, crumbled into pieces. But as she stood amidst the turmoil, Sarah felt something unexpected and eerie calm. This was her family, her community. She couldn't just wave a white flag or cower, there was too much at stake. With resolve swirling inside her, she took a deep breath. Beneath her calm, raw fear churned, the thought of her younger brother and mother feeling abandoned stung like betrayal. Here she was, so close to chasing her dreams of nursing, yet what if she became a casualty of someone else's desperation? Her mind raced. Who were these men? What pushed them to the edge? Questions fizzed and popped, threatening to drown her in doubt. "Please let us just talk," Sarah called out, stepping forward, her voice both hesitant and firm in the face of the chaos. The robbers turned, their eyes narrowed and hard, but catching one's gaze made her pulse quicken. In that fleeting moment, everything shifted. "I understand you're in a tough spot," she continued, words coming out before fully processing the risk. Would they care? Or was she inviting danger in? The fragility of the situation clawed at her bravado, each breath heavy with trepidation. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." As she calculated her next choice, her mind welled with memories of her brother's struggling grades, her mother's illness, and the weight that draped over her like a suffocating blanket. Could sharing these burdens create a connection instead of fear? A flicker of hope kindled within, but it was restrained by another wave of anxiety. What if she wasn't able to protect them? What if her voice got lost amidst the shouts and the chaos? Just then, clarity struck. A name floated in the wind, shattering the tenuous thread of her courage. One of the robbers lowered his weapon slightly, his eyes widening as recognition sparked. It couldn't be. A piece of her past, something she had buried for so long, emerged from the shadows, entwining their fates in an unfathomable dance. The memories flashed like lightning, and she was left facing a darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. "Sarah?" he breathed, stunned disbelief hanging in the air, and in that moment, the diner exhaled collectively, mother and daughter, hope and despair, swirling into an unbreakable crescendo of tension. What now? Would forgiveness bridge the gap between them, or would history dictate a darker path? The grip of uncertainty tightened, leaving everyone craving answers as the unsteady ground beneath their feet crumbled further into an abyss of broken choices. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her, reality tightening its grip as the name echoed in her mind. Jake. A haunting figure from her past, the boy from her childhood who had drifted into darkness. Gone were the long summer days filled with laughter, in their place was a man whose decisions had put them all in peril. Recognition flickered in his eyes, but the warmth of their shared history was drowned out by the chaos surrounding them. "It's been a long time," she managed to say, her voice cracking slightly under the weight of the moment. Each second felt like an eternity as she fought against the wave of emotions battling within her. Did he remember the secrets they shared, the dreams they exchanged? Was there still a sliver of connection she could grasp to pull him away from this brink? In that instant, the diner was no longer a mere setting, it had morphed into a crucible of emotions, a stark backdrop where past memories clashed with present choices. Time slowed as she searched his gaze, seeking the remnants of the boy she once knew. But fear creased his brow, and uncertainty twisted his features into a mask she barely recognized. "Sarah," he whispered again, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. For a heartbeat, hope pulsed through the room, fragile yet potent. She took another step forward, her palms sweaty and shaking but resolute. If she was to succeed in reaching him, she needed to remember the power of vulnerability and connection. "You don't have to do this. I know you're not like them." Jake flinched as if her words struck a nerve. A deep conflict played out behind his eyes, a battle between desperation and a flicker of humanity. Sarah saw in that moment not just the fraught adult before her but the flickering shadows of their joyful past bike rides, pool days, stolen snacks shared behind their houses. Could she leverage their shared innocence to sway him? The clamoring around them lessened, others were beginning to recognize this surreal moment. Her community had been reduced to wallet-holding hostages and frantic whispers. But Sarah believed in the strength of connection. They had fought together as children against the world, perhaps, just perhaps, they could do it once more. As she took another step, a sudden movement caught her periphery. A robber shifted, irritation etched on his face, the focus drifting away from their confrontation. The reality of the situation carved its way back through her reverie with alarming urgency. She couldn't just leave them unguarded. "Listen to me, Jake," she implored, her voice steadying as she embraced her resolve. "You are better than this. You know you are." She dared to step even closer, the world shrinking to just the two of them. The fire in her heart blazed brightly against fear, compelling her to reach for the remnant of their bond. But in the split second that followed, confusion morphed into reckless decisions. The other robbers caught sight of her boldness, their weapons raised higher, nerves coiling around fault lines of anxiety. Jake's face morphed from recognition to turmoil, and in that instant a rare vulnerability wavering on the cusp of surrender. "Get back!" one of the other robbers shouted, and Sarah's heart plummeted. Could she hold her ground? Could she redirect the tide of chaos? The weight of responsibility pressed down on her like an anchor. "Jake," she urged again, aware that her life and those around her hung in the balance of this moment. The diner had transformed into more than just a place of nostalgia, marking her journey towards courage and self-discovery. With every iteration of her plea, Sarah battled not just for survival but for someone who once stood as a part of her dreams. As the tension soared, she sensed the past colliding with the present, forcing her to confront not only Jake but also the parts of herself that had lain dormant beneath preparation and practice. Who would she become today? Would she emerge as the nurse she aspired to be, or would the fear of failure anchor her to the past? "Help me help you," she whispered, and in that heartbeat, history teetered on the brink of an irrevocable decision. The sound of shifting feet rattled her focus, and without warning, Jake's hand trembled, the weapon lowering just as the world erupted around them. Would he act on the memory of their childhood pact, or slip back into the isolation that once consumed him? As her breath caught in anxious anticipation, she realized that this confrontation was only the beginning. The momentary glimmer of hope danced over the abyss, but she knew one thing for certain: she had to fight for both of them. A decision loomed, and the next choice could flip their fates. In the delicate balance of what was about to unfold, she held on to her resolve, knotted with questions of every kind. As the door to their futures gaped wide, one simple truth emerged: the time had come to face not just danger, but the very essence of hope and redemption, shocking revelations lingering in every unspoken moment. The silence that enveloped the diner hung like a heavy mist, yet within that fog, Sarah felt the spark of possibility. Time slowed as she observed Jake's struggle, the tension in his jaw signaling an internal battle she could barely comprehend. It was a defining moment. She was no longer merely an observer of chaos, she was an active participant in a life-altering choice for both of them. Despite the surrounding frenzy, the yells of frightened patrons, the shattered glass that crunched beneath the robber's boots, there was a surreal clarity within her. In this charged atmosphere, she unearthed a resolve thick as steel. Each heartbeat resonated with the knowledge that she had crossed a threshold, away from passive fear into bold confrontation. In those fractious seconds, she prepared to reconfigure her approach to the boy she once knew. "Jake," she breathed, her voice steady like an anchor in a storm. She summoned the memories, those innocent, sun-soaked moments pressing on her consciousness. "We dreamed of becoming something bigger. You wanted to be a hero, not the thing nightmares are made of." Jake's expression flickered, a myriad of emotions dancing like shadows across his features. Doubt and regret battled with the bravado that had fueled his descent into chaos, their conflict mirroring her own internal journey. Could he remember the boy inside, buried beneath layers of survival instinct and hardened choices? Would he reach for the warmth of rekindled dreams or cling to the cold familiarity of his current path? The other robbers fidgeted, their weapons now wavering under the weight of uncertainty. Jake's gaze drifted from Sarah, seeking reassurance or possibly refuge from the consequences of their shared history. In this moment, she recognized the influence of vulnerability. If she could evoke the essence of the boy he had once been, perhaps he could reclaim a part of himself that had been pushed aside. "Remember that time we took your dad's old car for a joyride?" Sarah continued, a hint of urgency lacing her tone. "We swore we'd be brave. Come on, Jake. Be brave with me now." She saw a flicker of light behind his eyes, a fleeting arrival of the boy from their shared past. The tension cracked slightly, like a small chink in the armor he wore so defensively. It was a subtle shift, but one she clung to desperately. The other robbers shifted restlessly, impatience painting their features. It was now or never. Sarah was fully aware that time had become a fluid beast, each moment stretching and contracting, teasing the limits of her courage. She could feel their aggression simmering, yet she chose to harness her growing determination, using it as fuel against the encroaching despair. "Jake, think of us," she pressed, her voice sinking into the chaos like a lifeline. "Think of how we faced the world together as kids. We can face it now. Just let them go." In a heartbeat, she dropped down to his level, no longer towering over him. She extended her hand, a gesture steeped in trust. "Let me help you. Be that hero we thought we could be. You've got this." As those words wrapped around them, time snapped back into focus. Jake locked eyes with her, the tumult of conflicting emotions swirling like a storm. For Sarah, it was as if she reached beyond the present, grasping for their lost youth, fervently wishing to ignite the flames of their forgotten dreams. The room felt electric, the hesitation in Jake's demeanor could tip the scale in any direction. In those intense seconds, her fate, together with his, hung by the thinnest thread. Was he prepared to reclaim a fragment of his past, or would he succumb to the weight of his decisions? The shout of a robber broke her reverie, harsh and jarring, a reminder of the present threat. Sarah's heart raced as she pivoted from pleading to strategizing. If Jake couldn't break free, she might have to take drastic action herself. She had spent years learning to be a nurse, but now she was fighting to save a soul. Suddenly, an idea flickered. What if she turned their shared past into a distraction, an anchor for the conflict? In despair, Jake saw her remain strong, and the potential for redemption loomed larger than ever. Sarah tightened her grip on hope, knowing she faced more than just the threat of the robbers. The emotional stakes for both of them were sky-high. The ultimate test was nearing, a decision awaited them that could either mend their fractured bond or sever it irrevocably. The moment was dense with possibility. Would the strength of their connection rise from the ashes of despair, or would it crumble beneath the weight of choices long made? With the air crackling around them, Sarah braced herself for a confrontation that could lead to salvation or surrender, not just for Jake but for herself. The next moment would reveal everything. The clock ticked ominously, and as the choice lay ahead, she readied herself for whatever came next. The stakes had never been higher, and uncertainty loomed large, a haunting reminder that even in the face of chaos, the familiar echoes of the past could forge a path toward reclaiming the future. The air shimmered with intensity, defining the edges of Sarah's courage as she faced the impossible. Jake's gaze shifted, uncertainty brewing as he wrestled with the gravity of her words. The din of chaos receded, muffled by the weight of their shared history, a battleground where innocence met the stark reality of his choices. Let them go. Her voice broke through, firm yet gently coaxing. It was an invitation loaded with the essence of hope. She held her breath, waiting, clinging to the wish that he would respond, that the flicker she had seen earlier could ignite into a flame. Jake's brow furrowed, fighting an inner tempest. He wasn't just confronting her, he was up against everything he had become. The stark truth that his actions had led him down a path filled with darkness loomed. Sarah realized that he was spiraling, trapped within a storm of self-doubt and hardened identity. Within that realization lay an unsettling empathy. She knew how fragile identity could be, having wrestled with her own path in the years since they last shared laughter and dreams. Across the room, the robbers were restless, glancing at one another, anxiety etched on their faces. They had come for chaos but found themselves in the midst of something far more complex. Their unease fueled Sarah's rising determination. She needed to act, to draw Jake back from the precipice hanging before him. It struck her then his affection for her could be her greatest asset. "Jake, remember when you saved that stray dog?" She pressed, heart racing but her voice unwavering. "The one nobody wanted? You weren't afraid then. You were brave. You saw something worth saving." His eyes flickered, her words playing in the theater of his mind, threading through the memories of a boy who had dared to care in a world that often pushed him to the edges. She watched as guilt washed over his features, intertwining with the fear of who he really was. "Just take a step back," she said softly, as if hoping to guide him from a path he no longer recognized. "You don't have to be defined by this moment, Jake." The other robbers exchanged glances, the tension in the room thickened. Jake's breathing quickened, and she could almost feel the weight of his indecision reverberate between them. This was no longer about the diner or the robbery, it was about redemption and reclaiming lost pieces of themselves. "Stay with me, Jake. You're more than this." As her voice wove through the fragile silence, Sarah felt the wall between them crack further, a chink of vulnerability widening with her affection and persistence. "You wanted to be brave, right? This is your chance." But as he weighed her words, doubt loomed large, a frightening specter threatening to draw him back into the darkness. Her heart sank as she sensed the emotional tug-of-war playing out within him, a desire for connection warring with the desperation to maintain the persona he had built as a shield. A shout sliced through the atmosphere, shaking Sarah from her thoughts. One of the robbers, agitated and impatient, raised his weapon. The sudden escalation of threat snapped her back into reality. Sarah's instincts as a nurse surged forward, she couldn't afford to lose this moment. "Jake!" She surged forward, letting her body take the risk, believing in his capacity to choose. "Please, remember who you are." Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of determination in his eyes, a stark transformation that sent a jolt of electricity through her veins. Would he choose to save himself? Was there still a chance for him to embrace the boy who once dreamed of heroism? Just then, time seemed to stretch, teetering on the precipice of resolution. The severity of the moment outweighed all else. Jake's decision hung in the balance, with the next heartbeat poised to tip everything into a new reality. And in that moment of silence, as Sarah held her breath, the clock struck mercilessly and the world around them braced for an impending storm. What would Jake choose? The whisper of hope flickered tenuously amidst the chaos, but what lay beyond it remained shrouded in shadow, waiting to reveal itself. The heartbeat of the moment echoed in Sarah's ears, each pulse reverberating with urgency. She stepped closer to Jake, her presence both a shield and a beacon. The tension twisted tighter, a coiling spring of possibilities ready to unleash, contingent only on Jake's next action. He stood, a physical embodiment of conflict, wrestling not just with her words but with the man he had become, a man steeped in choices that felt irrevocable. In that instant, shadows of his past choices loomed large behind him, moments that felt powerful yet settled over him like lead. Though she saw the flicker of hope, it was intertwined with the heavier weight of despair. "Choose," she whispered, her voice a mix of resolve and invitation, transcending the strife around them, infused with the kind of depth that could leverage changes. Because it was becoming clear to her this wasn't just a mundane robbery with an overt threat. It was a manifestation of deeper battles waging within Jake, and she was standing at the threshold. As Sarah studied him, she recognized not just a man standing clutched by fear, she saw a reflection of her own struggles. Her journey as a nurse had been marked by similar choices, moments that demanded her to weigh compassion against despair. Could she ignite in Jake the same resilience she cultivated in herself when faced with dire circumstances? "Do you remember our dreams, Jake?" She pressed on, searching for any thread of connection. "We talked about where we wanted to go, the lives we wanted to lead. Somewhere along the way, we lost our way, but it's not too late. You can step back into who you were meant to be." The atmosphere thickened with her words as they wrapped around Jake, literally lifting him from his internal storm, challenging him to rise above his own narrative. Fear flitted momentarily from his face, revealing a glimmer of the hopeful boy he'd once been, one who saw beauty in the unlikeliest of places. But that flicker faded quickly, replaced by a grimace of overwhelming emotion. Behind him, the robbers shifted uneasily, their impatience growing with the strained dialogue. The moment hung precariously, an intricately woven tapestry of tension on the edge of unraveling. Sarah sensed their restlessness, time was not on their side. "Your past doesn't have to dictate your future," she urged, transitioning from nostalgia to conviction. "You can be brave again, this is your moment." The weapon-wielding robber's finger tautened over the trigger, intensifying the urgency. As he eyed Jake with barely veiled impatience, Sarah's heart raced. The balance had shifted, Jake's potential was battling against an imminent threat that was all too real. It wasn't just about saving lives, it was about awakening a dormant part of their lives: courage, connection, humanity. In his eyes, she could almost see a transformation as he wrestled with the two paths laid before him. He could either take shelter behind his persona and let the darkness claim him, or embrace the flicker of hope, shining bright and throwing open the door to redemption. Another shout from the robber reminded Sarah that the clock was ticking. This was the moment she feared. She could either stand for herself or be swept under by the waves of chaos. Suddenly, Jake's breath hitched, and Sarah felt the atmosphere shift. He was teetering on the edge of a decision, and whatever he chose would shape not just his fate but hers as well. Would he find the strength within to walk away from this life he had crafted? To tread back toward the person who could be brave? Would he take a leap of faith in himself to create a future worth living for? Sarah held her breath, waiting for the spark that would shift everything, tethered to the hope that surrounded her like a fragile, flickering flame. But it was that moment when Jake's eyes locked onto hers, filled with both anguish and clarity, that sent a shiver racing through her spine. Would he reach out beyond the darkness, or withdraw into it forever? The tension locked them in. In the ensuing stillness, the resolution that would unfold lay heavily coiled, waiting to spring free in a flash of action that would rewrite everything she believed in. And as the seconds stretched like an eternity, Sarah knew one thing: they were either walking toward their salvation or stepping directly into their nightmares. The choice would define them both. The silence became tangible, thick with the weight of shared pasts and uncertain futures. Sarah's heart thudded with each heartbeat, a metronome counting down the moments until the storm would break. Jake stood there, his resolve teetering, as if Sarah's words were a tightrope strung high above an abyss. "Jake," she breathed, her voice steady despite the chaos, "the only thing that can destroy you is surrendering to your fear. You control your narrative, don't let it control you." The conviction in her tone cut through the air, a sharp blade among blunt instruments of desperation. As anguish contorted Jake's features, it struck Sarah that she wasn't merely an observer in this moment. Her own professional journey as a nurse had been built on moments exactly like this, instances that demanded immediate action and unflinching strength. The instincts to overcome adversity surged within her. What made a nurse great was not just their ability to heal but their capacity to lead others out of darkness. Jake's eyes flickered, a collision of doubt and possibility raging within. If the man she once knew could emerge, they could defy this terrifying reality together. Could she decipher the fractures in his facade? Could she reawaken his true self? Yet, the awakening came with risks, and time was a cruel master. Remember when we dreamed of making a difference? She continued, nudging at the flicker of forgotten ambition. We said we would be the change we wanted to see. Behind them, impatience brewed among the robbers, their shifting and murmured threats amplifying the intensity. Fear prickled at Sarah's skin, urging her to act decisively. She was crossed in an inner battle that twisted much deeper than the present conflict, a stark contrast between her role as a protector and the lingering remnants of her own insecurities. Forget the prison you've built for yourself, Jake. Break free, even if it's just for this moment. Please. A moment of silence stretched. The world was suspended, waiting for Jake to unearth the man she was convinced was buried somewhere inside him. The tightening grip of his past clashed with the hope she desperately ignited, a potent mixture that could yield either his liberation or further entrapment. The weapon in the robber's hand became an extension of the tension, poised like a trigger to both fear and potential. Jake's brows knitted tighter, his jaw clenched, and she pressed on, feeling her own resolve solidify. She had stood in fight or flight moments countless times in emergency rooms, defusing the chaos within. Now she needed to tap into that well of strength again, a reminder to herself that her agency was as real as it was for him. Embrace the man you once were, not the stranger you've become, she urged, her voice breaking slightly. You have the power to change everything in just one instant. The clock ticked on, a steady drumbeat, almost mocking in its persistence. Jake's shoulders shuddered, tension thrumming through him like a bowstring pulled to its limit. The robbers shifted again, their impatience bubbling into aggression that sent a wave of panic coursing through her muscles. In that charged moment, Jake's energy crackled, a transition that felt both electric and perilous. His eyes softened as he met her gaze, searching for grounding, and for the first time, Sarah began to see him not as a man bent under pressure, but as a vessel waiting to overflow with possibility. Would he muster the courage to reclaim his life, to regain control, to forge a path leading away from the darkness screeching to engulf him? The precarious snap of time lingered, pregnant with promise and pitfall. And as Jake's fingers twitched, whether finding the strength to reach back or succumbing to resignation, Sarah felt the inevitable pull of the moment. His next choice would echo for them both. The world around them bristled with sharpened edges, as if the universe held its breath. Would they push away from despair, or plunge deeper into uncertainty? The answer spiraled in the air, ready to unveil itself in a heartbeat, an unfolding truth waiting to claim both their fates. In the flicker of uncertainty that enveloped them, Sarah's gaze remained steadfast on Jake, her heart racing as she anticipated his next move. She felt the weight of the room, a stifling force suffocated by tension, one that threatened to crush any flicker of hope. The robber's harsh whispers cut through her thoughts, sharpening the urgency to instill courage in Jake. Jake, Sarah whispered again, her pulse quickening, whatever you decide, it starts now. Don't just react, act with intention. There was an intensity in her voice that echoed the professionalism she had honed throughout years in the nursing field. Each patient interaction had solidified her belief in empowerment, and now, she sought to apply that wisdom to him. In those fleeting seconds, she reflected on the stark contrast between their paths. While her years had been dedicated to nurturing life and alleviating suffering, Jake had been lost in a labyrinth he had constructed, the very bricks representing his fears and failures. It was a prison of his own making, and she understood that he needed to dismantle it with his own hands. A glance to the side revealed the robbers growing impatient, their aggressive posturing a loud backdrop to their silent drama. Sarah fought back the intrusive thoughts that plagued her. Every instinct whispered caution. Her professional training instructed her to prioritize safety, to comply in specific scenarios. Yet something inside her rose against those lessons. It refused to let fear dictate the outcome. Think about it, Jake, she continued, her voice steady but urgent. "Remember the promise we made to not just live, but to thrive?" He paused then, the inner turmoil that had been wrestling with his spirit giving way to a flicker of recognition. Sarah could see at the glimmer of the person he used to be, the man who marched toward challenge rather than fleeing from it. A few steps forward, she thought, that's all it would take. As if responding to her silent plea, Jake engulfed himself in a deep breath, and she sensed the moment was precariously close. Sarah's own heart raced along with a compelling thought. They were both facing invisible chains, the circumstances binding Jake intertwined with the fears she had clung to longer than she cared to admit. "Challenge fear with action, Jake. You've faced worse." The words tumbled out, clear and concise. Her mind whirred, not merely with worry but with strategy. She needed to devise an approach that would allow him to reclaim his narrative while shifting the odds against the robbers. The subtle shift in Jake's posture didn't go unnoticed. A squared jaw, a steadied breath, he was grasping the tether of his past, fueled by the belief that Sarah held in him. Each moment cascaded into another, anticipation building, as the unseen potential hung in the balance. She whispered again, more of a breath than a command. "Let us do this together." The appeal resonated, syncing with the emergence of defiance brewing in his core. Increasingly engaged by the moment, Sarah calculated her next steps. An eruption of chaos around them might just give Jake the opening he needed. It was a gamble, one she wasn't entirely sure she was ready for, but the stakes were too high to retreat into silence. Then, there it was. Jake's hand moved, an instinctive response. The weapon of a robber loomed ominously close, yet he twisted his body, effectively redirecting his fear into something palpable, something that could confront the harbingers of despair. Sarah's breath caught, the reaction spiraled before her eyes. Jake was moving, and as the robbers stumbled at the unpredictability, she felt her heart leap with a blend of exhilaration and dread. Whatever happened next wouldn't just define the moment, it could reshape both their futures irrevocably. And as the tension spiraled into action, Sarah braced herself, the echo of decisions looming large in her mind. Was their unyielding moment of defiance about to culminate in resolution, or would they plunge even deeper into chaos? The narrative of fear whispered temptation, but the strands of their fates twisted together, ready to break free or snap under pressure. Just as she sensed the transformation, chaos erupted. An unpredictable response was forming, poised to redefine everything they had once envisioned. In the heart of tumult, chaos began to unravel as Jake's motion cut through the thick air. He thrust himself forward, not merely as a reaction to the looming threat, but as a statement of reclamation. He was no longer just a man trapped by his past, he was beginning to confront it head-on. Sarah's breath caught as she watched, a twinge of fear overshadowed by a rush of awe. "Do it, Jake," she urged, an instinctive battle cry rooted in the years of care she had provided to her patients, urging them toward resilience. She hoped he could hear the faith resounding in her tone, anchoring her through uncertainty. But the critical moment was fleeting. The gangsters, startled by Jake's abrupt defiance, stumbled for stability. The sudden shift presented an opening, yet the path was laden with peril, as unpredictability danced around them like a live wire. Jake's courage flickered, his expression a mix of desperation and determination. Sarah felt a surge of protective instinct, she could not let him retreat into the despair he was so used to. "Think about what you want, Jake. Freedom. Dignity." Her voice was a steadying rhythm amidst the discord. "You can't let fear dictate your choices anymore." Jake's eyes flared with a realization that coursed through him. The chance to seize this moment meant more than just survival, it was a reclamation of his identity, a way to reforge the bonds that had long since dimmed. The narrative he had been writing wasn't a fatalistic script, it was a chance for a new chapter. But as the robbers recalibrated, their eyes narrowing to assess the emerging threat that Jake posed, tension tightened around them like a steel band. Sarah's mind raced, a mix of surgical precision and the urgency of the moment ignited her instincts. She needed an escape plan, anchored in the reality that they were both capable of more than they ever believed. "Now, Jake," she whispered, sensing the rising tide of tension. The moment wasn't just about him, he was now a part of their collective fate. Supporting him meant embracing the risk herself. With a sudden flash, she stepped closer, trying to divert attention away from Jake. "Hey! Look over here." Her voice rang out with clarity, commanding attention. Timing was everything, and the gamble required not just courage, but strategy, a delicate dance between fear and newfound determination. The gangsters, momentarily distracted, shifted their focus toward her, brewing chaos within their ranks. Sarah felt her heart hammering in her chest, her voice had become a weapon, her calm a contrast to the turmoil. She silently prayed that the moment would catalyze a series of decisions, each more audacious than the last. "Jake! Move!" she commanded, so sure of his burgeoning strength in that fleeting second. The confidence in her words fueled her belief in him, as though they were coalescing into something tangible, a shield against the despair that had once paralyzed them both. Jake responded, propelled by Sarah's unwavering belief. He lunged into the fray, channeling all the regret, shame, and fear he had ever felt into this singular act of defiance. He was not a boy lost but a man choosing to fight back against whatever had tried to define him. As they tore through the calamity surrounding them, bursts of activity unfolded. The robbers' shouts pierced the air, their surprise transformed into frantic aggression, but their misplaced confidence gushed through cracks of chaos. In those heart-thumping moments, Jake and Sarah became intertwined, a duo in the high stakes of survival, each movement a testament to the growth beating inside them like a drum. Yet even in their rising momentum, shadows of uncertainty loomed. Would they be able to escape intact, or would the ambitions of reckless men overtake the resolve of two determined spirits? As sirens began to wail in the distance, a reminder of impending salvation yet with incorrect timing, Sarah's gut tightened. Their risky strategy was paying off, but the precipice of danger was still perilously close. "Whatever happens next, stand together," Sarah yelled, over the anguish resonating around them. Just as Jake nodded, suddenly aware of their fates entwined like thread through the needle of destiny, the door burst open with startling ferocity. There they stood, facing an unforeseen, formidable force that threatened to reshape everything. And it was in that moment of collision with uncertainty what waited beyond the threshold could either bring them freedom or plunge them into a deeper conflict than their hearts had ever known. Jake's heart pounded as the door swung wide, revealing a new set of dangers that saturated the atmosphere with foreboding. The silhouettes on the other side were telltale signs of authority, their uniforms visible even amidst the chaos that defined the moment. The robbers reacted with a combination of fury and fear, like cornered animals ready to lash out, the urge to fight overtaking their cowardice. "Sarah, we have to move now," Jake urged, feeling the adrenaline surge through him, igniting the fire of instinct and desperation. His previous sense of doubt was eclipsed by a burgeoning resolve, sharpened by the clarity of his purpose. They needed to get past the chaos swiftly, complacency was a luxury they couldn't afford. "I see it, Jake. Head toward the side," Sarah commanded, her voice slicing through the din as if cutting through water. Instinctually, she had shifted gears into crisis mode, her years of medical training and experience coming to the forefront. She focused, her gaze scanning their surroundings, making choices where fear might have opted for hesitation. The gangsters hesitated as confusion rippled through their ranks. The confusion was Jake's ally, he had come to understand that manipulation of chaos was as crucial as its management. He took a deep breath, calming the surge of anxiety threatening to detract from his newfound clarity of intent. In this moment, he didn't just want to survive, he wanted to reclaim his life, a canny strategy to reshape his own narrative away from loss and insignificance. "Trust me," he said to Sarah, emboldened by her presence. He had often seen himself as a shadow in the past, unworthy of taking center stage. Yet today, standing side by side with her, he felt the strength of their combined vulnerability reshaping his own self-image. They darted toward the exit, weaving their way through the scatter of uncertainty. Each step they took toward the door was both a rejection of their former selves and an embrace of a shared future that was not linked to the chains of their past. In those fleeting moments, Jake discovered he was more than the remnants of a broken man, he was becoming a force of resilience. But the gangsters were not the only ones who could read the room. The arriving officers shouted commands, demanding compliance, drawing a line that was as clear as it was daunting. Instinctively, Jake squeezed Sarah's hand tighter, embracing the very essence of solidarity. "Jake!" she whispered urgently, her voice strained with the weight of urgency. "If we use the fire escape in the back, we can break free before they regroup." The idea struck him like lightning. He mentally traced the pathways they'd taken in better times, memories of dull conversations and laughter, but now, he needed to translate those familiar routes into survival. There was a fire escape at the rear, an exit he had overlooked, buried under the weight of uncertainty. His decision crystallized. "Go," he urged Sarah, taking the lead, bolstered by the trust she had instilled in him. They dashed through the dining area, glancing over their shoulders as the chaos erupted anew, the shouts of authority mixing with the screams of criminals unfurling into a cacophony of confusion. Jake's thoughts looped around an audacious question: could they change their fates with this one act? He believed they could. At the back, the fire escape was illuminated weakly, a beacon of hope that invigorated his step. As they mounted the stairs, a chaotic barrage of shouts erupted behind them, voices that carried the distinct flavor of desperation and fear. They were close, Jake could feel the sensation of possibility intertwining with the air around them. But with the taste of uncertainty lingered an unsettling realization: they could very well be cornered again. Nevertheless, Jake's resolve commanded every heavy breath. He had shed the mantle of victimhood, shifting into a form he had never imagined possible, one forged in action, buoyed by unexpected camaraderie. But just as they burst through the door onto the rooftop, the world outside became a dizzying platform of aching heights and unnerving vastness. There, at the edge of the building, stood the dichotomy of liberation, emancipation through the unknown, or reliance on the illusions of safety below. Jake glanced at Sarah, their fates entwined in this thrilling yet alarming moment, and realized that the threshold of their past was merely a stepping stone to untold challenges that lay ahead. And as he contemplated the precipice before them, that same question haunted his heart: what awaited them on the other side of this reckless leap? Standing atop the building, the city sprawled below like an intricate puzzle, each piece representing a different life, a different story. Jake felt the exhilaration of embrace, teetering on the edge of a future that beckoned to him, both terrifying and luminous. The pounding of his heart echoed in his ears, mingling with the distant sirens that were rushing to the scene behind them, mingling with his own adrenaline-fueled resolve. Together. Sarah's voice commanded clarity amidst the chaos. Her unwavering gaze bolstered his courage, and as the weight of their past combined with the gravity of their present tugged at both of them, he felt an undeniable urge, a shared commitment to break free from the shackles of their histories. He took a deep breath, focusing on the life he aspired to pursue, the future he yearned to grasp just beyond the threshold of uncertainty. "This is the moment," he muttered fiercely, a voice that resonated from deeper within than he ever anticipated. He had transformed from a prisoner of his past to a warrior in the present. Flashes of their childhood flickered through his mind, times when they chased the world down together, unfazed by the struggles that loomed. Now, here stood a metaphorical crossroads, the line drawn starkly not just on the rooftop, but etched deep within their souls. He was not just leaping for himself, he was pulling Sarah with him into a liberated tomorrow, a rebellion against everything that had held them captive. "On three!" Sarah called, her own determination a beacon, one that radiated warmth against the harshness of their reality. In unison, they counted together, and with resolute hearts, they leaped. The world fell away for that heartbeat, and both gave themselves over entirely to transformation, their connection drawn from memories of laughter and dreams forged anew in a solid foundation of courage. A visceral freedom surged through them. They landed with the thud of unmapped promise, rolling onto the adjoining rooftop, laughter erupting from a place of disbelief. For a moment, the two stood in disbelief, hearts pounding, eyes wide, surrendering to the joyous realization that they had defied their circumstances. They had chosen action over submission, hope over despair. Each exchanged glance forged a new path. It was a resurrection of their dreams and aspirations. They began to run, the urban landscape whirling around them, intoxicating and liberating. The din of chaos from behind receded, faded into the rapid collective beat of their wildly liberated hearts. As they reached the alley quickening ahead, reality crashed back. The sirens were louder now, but it was merely a reminder of a life left behind, a symbol of their tumultuous beginnings. Yet, together, equipped with newfound strength, they dove into a world of possibilities. "Sarah," Jake said, panting, laughter bubbling at the edges of exhaustion. This euphoric state that emerged from adrenaline was only a precursor of their determination. "We did it." The sense of achievement tasted sweet, the palpable distance from fear working to draw them closer to the semblance of a life redefined. "I didn't think I'd be saying this, but we're alive," she grinned, mirroring the joy that surged through him, illuminating shadows that had once surrounded their futures. In that moment, recognition washed over them. Both had been reborn through their shared struggle. The sisterhood and rapport that once existed had been battered, but now it had been forged anew through fire. As they paused to catch their breath, reality settled in. Jake understood that the choice they made to confront their past allowed them to fully embrace their future. He had always aspired to be more, and now he felt the mantle of his desires resting comfortably on his shoulders. Each step away from that diner represented a conscious choice to reclaim self-identity, independence, and dignity. "Jake, we're going to do something great," Sarah voiced, conviction woven into her words. It wasn't just bravado, it was an anthem of potential harmonizing with their newfound resolve. They were not merely survivors, they were equals in courage, companions in a journey that promised growth. Together, he echoed, emotions coiling within him, brewing pride against the backdrop of his fears. The sirens shivered on the periphery but faded, reduced to mere hallucinations of past chaos. Instead, what lay ahead was a burgeoning journey waiting for them to mold it. They would navigate through a world that dauntingly stretched before them, drawing strength from their shared transformation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, warmth embraced their surroundings, illuminating the possibilities in the shadows of evening, the spark of potential beginning to flicker strongly. At long last, Jake had conquered his fears, establishing himself as the man he dreamed he could be. No longer trapped by the chains of his childhood, he was recrafted by moments of courage, guided by the strength born from a formidable connection in Sarah. They stood intertwined not just in courage but ambition, in the unwavering belief that they could achieve what had eluded them for so long. Disparate worlds stood behind them, and ahead lay the unknown, melded into a landscape of dreams, a reality waiting for them both. This was their beginning. Now, to all whose hearts resonate with this remarkable journey of transformation, subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support inspiring tales like this. Comment with your reactions and theories about this life-changing conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful testimony of courage and hope. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions.